A lot of people, they want to, they understand inherently now the danger of organizations getting too big and too powerful, because ultimately that organization that controls how a billion people think is run by one person with four people advising them at the top. And so is it really wise for four people or one person to decide what a billion people can think and say and do, and how far apart they should sit, or whether or not they should smile, or what they should wear? And so I think the entire crypto movement is a backlash against that.
Today's video, we are going to look into who Michael Saylor is and why Bitcoin really is hope for the future. I found an interview Michael did on the Rose Show YouTube channel. The entire interview is worth a watch, and I'll link a description, or put a link to it in the description. I wanted to show her introduction especially, which goes into describing Michael's past and just some of his accomplishments. I truly think Michael is a genius with a vision of the future, a vision of hope. The world needs people like Mike Saylor. Enjoy this clip.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I have the high honor of being here with an amazing person, Michael Saylor. He is the executive chairman of Microstrategy, founder of Alarm.com. He's named as inventor on 40 plus patents, and he's author of the book Ahead of Its Time, The Mobile Wave. He founded and serves as trustee on Saylor Academy, a non-for-profit organization providing free education to over 1 million students worldwide. He's an advocate for the Bitcoin standard, and he has dual degrees from MIT. How are you doing today, Michael?
Happy to be here, Rosanna. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So grateful to have you. So when people think of Michael Saylor, they think Bitcoin. And when they think of Bitcoin, they think of Michael Saylor. So I think it's appropriate we start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most secure financial asset in the world. It is the killer app of the digital age. It's a store of value that transcends time and space. It's energy. It's an asset. It's digital gold, freedom, truth, security, thermodynamically sound, immutable, incorruptible. It's hope and the future. Michael, is this what Bitcoin is to you? And please tell us more about your thoughts on Bitcoin.
All of those things and more. It's for those that study Bitcoin, they'll tell you there's a rabbit hole. It's a bottomless well of intricacy and wisdom. And that's why it arouses such passion and loyalty and excitement everywhere in the world. There's so many different ways you could think of it. For someone that knew nothing about Bitcoin, I would say, imagine 100 families came together and they decided that they wanted to create a bank to put all their money in for the next 1,000 years. And they didn't trust each other, and they didn't trust their heirs. Like, I don't know who my grandson's grandson or granddaughter's granddaughter is going to be. They didn't trust the mayor. They didn't trust the state, the governor. They didn't trust the country. They didn't even know that they would be in that locale. But what they did know is they wanted to create what we'll think of as a cooperative bank in cyberspace that they could collectively trust. A bank that's made up to serve imperfect people through unpredictable, volatile times, constructed of imperfect components, but we wanted the bank to be perfect or trustworthy. So if I gave you that challenge, like, how do you start a bank that'll last 1,000 years, that no government will corrupt and will never have corrupted management and no one will ever loot it? How do you solve that problem? And people have tried to solve these problems for thousands and thousands of years. And the problem with most banks is the banks are constructed of imperfect human beings. They're machines of human flesh. And at best, they would store money composed of a mineral like gold. And that's an imperfect element too. And you could see the pharaohs tried to solve the problem by burying all their money in pyramids. Didn't quite work. People tried gold coins. They tried the giant stone coin of the Yap people. They tried glass beads. They tried tobacco bales. Isaac Newton tried to solve the problem when he ran the mint in London, and we never really had the ability to construct a bank that wasn't managed by people, subject to the whims of government and politicians that utilize materials freely available in nature, until Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a bank in cyberspace run by incorruptible software for everybody on Earth that wants to store their value in a place that's beyond the reach of a corporation or a government or a politician or an army. And the way it works is we use a combination of cryptography with energy, pure energy, electricity, and then we combine that with digital power. And the measure of digital power is hash rate, SHA-256 hashes. The electricity is measured in gigawatts or megawatt hours. The cryptography is the best we could come up with at the time, and uncrackable as far as we know. And the way it works is one engineer or group of engineers, we refer to as Satoshi, decided to cap the number of units at 21 million. 21 million coins, we'll call it, subdividable into 100 million Satoshis, and then secure the network using proof of work, such that every 10 minutes there's a new block of transactions that's executed, and that block of transactions shifts ownership of the asset from party A to party B using public-private key cryptography. And the beauty of this is the bank isn't run by people. It's run by a software protocol. The second beauty is we're not storing assets like commodities. We're not storing silver or gold or pork bellies or barrels of oil. All of these things can be manufactured by factories and by humans, and so they're not scarce. And we're also not storing pieces of paper like the peso or the lira or the dollar, because those are even less scarce. They might be the Reichmark and the yen, and every fiat currency in the history of the world has gone to zero. The greatest fiat currency in the history of the world is the dollar, and the dollar has been losing 7% of its value every year for 100 years. Which means if you do the math, you'll find that over the course of about 100 years, you'll lose 99.9% of your money in the dollar, and that's the best it's going to be. It gets worse than that. If you happen to be in Turkey or Lebanon or Argentina, you're going to lose 99.9% of your wealth in 25 or 30 years, and unless you're in Venezuela, in which case you may lose it within 5 to 10 years. So commodity money doesn't work. Fiat currency money doesn't work. Well, the idea of storing your money in corporations, like owning shares of stock or owning buildings, doesn't really work for 1,000 years either. You don't know any company's going to last 1,000 years. You don't know that building is going to last 1,000 years. And in fact, we know it won't. And we also know that whatever city your building is in may not be around in 1,000 years. So these are imperfect ways to store value, not to mention the fact that it may be difficult for your granddaughter to move the building from LA to Monaco to Singapore. So Satoshi invents the Bitcoin, 1/21 millionth of everything that's ever going to be on the network. So if you join the network, you're basically depositing your money at a bank in cyberspace. And then the last question becomes, well, who runs the computer with the software on it? I know the software is, how do I make the software trustworthy? Well, I make it open source and I publish the code so everyone can audit it. Okay, check. So maybe the software code is honest. but then it runs on a computer. And what if somebody corrupts the computer or swaps out the software when I'm not paying attention? And so all those families get the bright idea that they're all going to run their own version of the software. And that's where the concept of be your own bank comes from. What if you had a bank in cyberspace, but everybody could run it? You could run it on a Raspberry Pi computer. Maybe you could run it on your Apple Watch. You could run it on any smartphone. You could run it on any computer anywhere in the world. And one day we move toward a point where all 8 billion people on the planet can run their own bank, and they can all audit all the transactions that have ever occurred on that network. And that is the case today. Bitcoin is run on tens of thousands of nodes all around the world. Every node audits every single transaction that's ever taken place. The software is incorruptible because the people that have their money in the bank are running their own version of the software, and they're not stupid enough to swap out the honest version for the dishonest version. If they did, though, they get kicked off the network. Right? It's like we all speak the language of the bank, and if you want to change the definition of love to hate, and if you want to change the definition of green to blue, we don't speak the same language anymore. I just stop recognizing you as a speaker of the same language as me. So Bitcoin was a very powerful idea, a protocol, a monetary banking protocol that was egalitarian, that everybody could run, that was so simple you could expect it to last 1,000 years or 10,000 years or 100,000 years. And then the last issue is, so how do we protect it from being overwhelmed by our enemies with their own army of computers? And the key to that was something called SHA-256 hashing. Satoshi offered a protocol whereby millions and millions of mining nodes all attempt to build the next block. But in order to build it, you have to solve a problem, which is the proof of work problem. And there's no shortcut. You literally have to look for the hash that meets the nonce requirement every 10 minutes. The difficulty to do that has gone up from a factor of 1 to a factor of 51 trillion in the 14 years the network's been around. So it's gotten exponentially harder. And that means that there's a network of miners that have to keep getting upgraded. Initially, people mined Bitcoin, or they ran the Bitcoin network from a computer. And then they ran it from a big server, and then they ran it from an array of 100 servers, and then they realized they should upgrade it from a CPU to a GPU to run it faster. And then they started building special purpose machines called ASICs to run it faster. And then they upgraded from the first generation ASIC to the second generation ASIC to the third generation ASIC to the fourth generation ASIC. Today, these new ASICs, like an S19 Pro, these things would be 2,000 times more efficient than the best Amazon CPU you could rent by the hour. So, it's a very efficient machine for generating digital power.
Okay, that kind of gives a little insight into Michael's background. There were a couple of things that girl said at the beginning that I didn't know, and a little bit of how he thinks about Bitcoin, the unconfiscatability of it. The reason I'm such a zealot about Bitcoin is because I just don't want to put my money into fiat currency. You guys have a good day. I'm going to try to find some more clips